Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our live coverage of OneWeb 20 mission from the West Coast, that is from the Pad Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. We hope you all are doing fine and excited about the upcoming launch. Hello, everyone. I am Deepto Mitra and I'll be the commentator for today's exciting launch. Before we dive into the mission details, I want to take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to each of you for joining us today on behalf of entire AstroYonder's team and our awesome moderators. Big thanks to our amazing YouTube community for being here as we bring you all the space launch coverage loaded with stats and deep insights. Your support means everything to us and we are super grateful to have you with us. We are super excited bringing you the live coverage of SpaceX's 103rd overall launch and the 98th Falcon 9 launch of this year. We are waiting for a Falcon 9 liftoff at 1:13 a.m. Eastern Time from Vandenberg Space Force Base for a southwesterly launch for SpaceX OneWeb 20 mission. Today's Falcon 9 will launch the final batch of OneWeb's Generation 1 satellites to the polar orbit. Today's OneWeb mission marks SpaceX's amazing 394th overall launch with the 381st Falcon 9 launch to date. This is the 33rd dedicated non-Starlink mission launch of the year for SpaceX. Just a quick update, NASA and SpaceX are now targeting not earlier than 9:05 p.m. Eastern Time on October 21st for the undocking of the Crew 8 mission from space station due to prevailing bad weather conditions off the coast of Florida. On October 21st at 5 a.m. Eastern Daytime, there is the next weather briefing and there are signs of improvement of the weather this mid of the upcoming week. Now let's take a look at the payload details for OneWeb 20 mission. This launch marks the final batch of OneWeb's 648 planned first generation satellites. Built by OneWeb Satellites, a joint venture between Airbus and OneWeb at Merritt Island, Florida. The OneWeb satellite dimensions is roughly 1 meter by 1.3 meters. The power generation using the solar panels is around 2.5 kilowatt. The first generation of OneWeb satellite operates on a quasi-polar orbit around altitude of 1200 kilometers with 86.4 degrees of orbital inclination. Each OneWeb satellite is fitted with steerable phased array antennas to beam internet signals to Earth for continuous coverage which operates in Ku band and Ka band. Each satellite provides 8 gigabits per second of total capacity, which is capable of supporting high-speed internet for rural and unreserved areas. The satellite allows for low latency communications with expected latency levels between 30 milliseconds to 50 milliseconds, which is much lower than the traditional geostationary satellites. But this latency is higher than Starlink satellites, which have nearly 28 milliseconds of latency. Starlink is now aiming to reduce the median latency of Starlink internet in the US to under 20 milliseconds. OneWeb satellites are powered by Russian xenon-based ion engines manufactured by OKB Fakel for orbital adjustments and the end-of-life deorbiting. Interestingly, the OneWeb satellites lacks inter-satellite links, which is there in Starlink satellites, and for that OneWeb satellites cannot perform inter-satellite communications and can only be used near a ground relay station. Each satellite weighs approximately 147.7 kilograms, and today's total launch mass is 2,954 kilograms. Now just a quick fun fact, OneWeb Launch 19 mission from Vandenberg last year included a demonstration satellite for its Generation 2 fleet called JoySat to test some technicalities of the newer satellites. Would like to welcome Simon Haga joining us. Hello Simon, we hope that you are doing well. Now let's take a look at the flight record for the booster supporting today's OneWeb mission. The booster with tail number 1082 supporting today's mission is quite a young booster with 6 previous flights in its record, including one non-Starlink mission, the USSF 62 launch, a national security mission for the United States Space Force. Additionally, the booster previously supported 5 Starlink missions. The booster made its debut with the Starlink Group 7-9 mission from Vandenberg on January 3rd of this year. So it is quite evident how new this booster is, with an age of just 9 months, 2 weeks and 2 days. The last mission supported by today's booster was Starlink 11-1 from here at Vandenberg on 4th of August this year. It is now 77 days since last used. Another quick fun fact regarding this booster. The booster with tail number 1082 supporting today's mission has all its previous flights from Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg. And today the booster will be having its second ground landing with previous 5 drone ship landings. Would like to welcome Fairmaid, one of our moderator here. Good morning, Fairmaid. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you are doing fine. And we are sorry for yesterday. We did saw that you were on the stream, but due to the bad weather conditions over here, we could not stream yesterday's Starlink launch. Now let's have a look at the bar graph presenting number of Falcon 9 launches each year. Before today's launch, SpaceX completed 97 successful launches of Falcon 9 so far this year as part of its milestone, with the recent Starlink 8-19 mission launch yesterday on October 18th, marking one more than the number of Falcon 9 launches made last year. The launch marked the 29th consecutive successful launch since the Starlink 9-3 mission failure. Now with today's launch of OneWeb's 20th mission launch, the bar graph shows 98 Falcon 9 launches so far this year, which is 2 more than the launches made last year. SpaceX already made as many launches as they did all of last year, and it's only been 9 months and 19 days of this year. Overall, with today's launch, SpaceX will have 103 launches this year as SpaceX stays on course to achieve its ambitious target of 140 to 148 launches by the year's end. A general pre-launch timeline for Falcon 9, so we won't be getting more into this. Well, there is just one exception worth mentioning, that the strong back reclining process here at Vandenberg, which differs from that at Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center. Here at Vandenberg, we recline the strong back 13 degrees, whereas at Cape Canaveral and Kennedy Space Center, we recline the strong back about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9. So that's a point to be noted. Today's main fun lies in the post-launch timeline, and that we will be discussing in just a few minutes. Let's go ahead and briefly step through the trajectory for today's OneWeb 20 mission. Falcon 9 leaving the pad from Space Launch Complex 4 East from Vandenberg Space Force Base with a batch of 20 OneWeb satellites on board for somewhat a southwest trajectory heading into low Earth orbit, indicated by that green line on your screen. The red line you see indicates where the Falcon 9 first stage will land after stage separation, just a little later, leaving California's coast. Today this will be a return to launch site flight, making the landing for the first stage here at landing zone 4 on the west coast, which means that the first stage booster with the tail number 1082 flying for its 7th time will be returning, heading out for a ground landing today. This will be the 21st landing on landing zone 4 to date. Estimated fairing recovery approximately 500 kilometers downrange, and the stage 2 debris re-entry will be in the south of Cape Town during second orbit. Currently there are 3 in SpaceX drone ship fleet. One of the 3 drone ships just read the instructions, and a shortfall of Gravitas are stationed here in Florida, while of course I Still Love You is stationed in California. We are expecting the addition of a 4th drone ship likely by the end of this year or early next year. Speaking of fairing recovery, SpaceX will utilize the recovery vessel Go Beyond to retrieve the two halves of the payload fairing from the Pacific waters. The two halves of the payload fairing will be recovered slightly farther, approximately 500 kilometers downrange, after they will smoothly splash down with the guidance of the parachutes. You can see on your screen how a fairing recovery looks like. Although the recovery vessel on your screen is dug, performing fairing recovery operations, but today's supporting recovery vessel, as mentioned before, it is Go Beyond. Other recovery vessel Bob, Doug, and Go Cosmos at the East Coast is currently awaiting its next assignment. Now here is a short video of a fairing half. You know, that protective shell from a rocket's payload making its way back home, piercing through the Earth's atmosphere, creating a mesmerizing halo around it due to the atmospheric friction. We hope you enjoyed this stunning short clip. If you feel like we are adding value to your viewing experience, please consider giving this video a like. It really helps YouTube's algorithm bring in more space lovers and rocket fans to discover this stream, which helps us to build a community with amazing space enthusiasts like you. Also consider about smashing the subscribe button and turning on the bell notification as we work hard to bring you detailed streams with stats and insights. We would be super grateful for your support. Now here is a fun lying post launch timeline. Let's have a look. At T plus 1 minute and 6 seconds, Falcon 9 will pass through max Q, a point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Then a couple of different events coming up in rapid succession. First will be at T plus 2 minutes and 15 seconds, where first stage main engine cutoff will occur, also known as MECO, followed by a major milestone within 4 seconds at T plus 2 minutes and 19 seconds, where first and second stage will separate from each other. Just after 8 seconds later, second stage MVAC engine will ignite for the first time during today's flight, that is SES-1, at T plus 2 minutes and 27 seconds. T plus 2 minutes and 32 seconds, first stage boost back burn begins just after having a flip maneuver with the help of nitrogen cool gas thrusters. Coming up next at T plus 3 minutes and 2 seconds mark, Falcon 9's payload fairings will be jettisoned, exposing the payload to the vacuum of space. Now here is a short video of the fairing separation and the MVAC ignition. You can see how the fairing halves separate, exposing the payload on board the second stage to space, and followed by the MVAC ignition. Coming back to the post-launch timeline, at T plus 3 minutes and 28 seconds, first stage boost back burn ends, followed by the grid fins deployment on the first stage. After 2 minutes and 50 seconds, at T plus 6 minutes and 18 seconds, the first stage entry burn will begin, lasting for 15 seconds up to 6 minutes and 33 seconds mark, ending the entry burn for the Falcon 9's first stage. Next major milestone at T plus 7 minutes and 18 seconds, the first stage landing burn will commence, which will orient and set up the first stage for SpaceX's iconic precision ground landing. At T plus 7 minutes and 56 seconds, the first stage will land on the landing zone 4 for its 21st time for this particular landing zone, marking SpaceX's 356th overall booster landing to date. The second stage MVAC engine will shut down, that is SECO 1, for the first time in today's flight and enter into a parking orbit at T plus 8 minutes and 29 seconds. T plus 55 minutes and 3 seconds, the second stage MVAC engine will reignite for a quick 3 seconds of burn, that is SES 2, and turning it off at T plus 55 minutes and 6 seconds, that is SECO 2, which will set up the batch of 20 OneWeb satellites for its deployment sequence, beginning at T plus 59 minutes and 3 seconds, with the first pair of satellites, and the deployment sequence concludes with the 10th pair of satellites at approximately T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 53 seconds. Let's walk through this exciting OneWeb satellite deployment sequence, as these moments between satellite releases are vital for ensuring proper satellite separation. Beginning with T plus 59 minutes and 3 seconds, the deployment sequence begins with the deployment of the first and second OneWeb satellites, marking the start of critical payload separation operation. At T plus 59 minutes and 35 seconds, following a 32 seconds wait from the previous deployment, the third and fourth OneWeb satellites are deployed into orbit. Next, after a brief pause of 56 seconds, the fifth and sixth OneWeb satellite are released at T plus 1 hour and 31 seconds, showing the mission's efficiency and precise timing. Now, in a swift 2 seconds window, the 7th and 8th OneWeb satellites join their counterparts in space at T plus 1 hour and 33 seconds. This brief gap between deployments emphasizes the rhythm that the mission is following, where every second counts. A longer break this time, with 1 minute and 40 seconds elapsing before the satellites continue to build their constellation. At T plus 1 hour, 2 minutes and 13 seconds, at this point, the 9th and 10th OneWeb satellites are released. The mission continues as the 11th and the 12th OneWeb satellites are deployed at T plus 1 hour, 12 minutes and 43 seconds. After a significant 10 minutes and 30 seconds of careful monitoring and system checks. These lengthy intervals ensures that every phase of the deployment goes smoothly without a hitch. Then, following a pause of 3 minutes and 32 seconds, the 13th and the 14th OneWeb satellites make their way into orbit, at T plus 1 hour and 16 minutes and 15 seconds. The mission team continues to deliver on time, showcasing the power of automation in space technology. After another brief but crucial break, 56 seconds of precise timing, the 15th and the 16th OneWeb satellites are released into space at T plus 1 hour, 17 minutes and 11 seconds. With each release, the constellation grows stronger and the mission edges closer to the completion. Nearing the end of the deployment sequence, the 17th and the 18th OneWeb satellites take their place among the stars after 1 minute and 16 seconds since the last deployment at T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 27 seconds. The steady flow of the satellites builds anticipation as the sequence heads towards its conclusion. Finally, after 26 seconds, the deployment sequence wraps up with the release of the 19th and the 20th OneWeb satellites at T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 53 seconds. With this last action, the spacecraft continues on its mission, leaving behind a perfectly executed satellite deployment. This entire sequence is a great example of efficiency and precise science involved in modern space missions, with every moment meticulously planned to ensure the success of OneWeb satellite network expansion. Right now, we are 4 minutes away from the webcast to begin. Before proceeding, let's check whether the launch is proceeding as scheduled and to keep ourselves informed. Well, yes, and I was wrong. We are nearly 13 minutes away from the webcast to begin, so we have some time in between. So let's discuss some of the stats related to today's mission. Today's launch marks 394th SpaceX overall launch and the 33rd dedicated non-Starlink mission launch for this year. This marks the 381st Falcon 9 launch to date. Today's mission is the 5th OneWeb satellite launch for SpaceX, marking the 20th OneWeb launch, which is the final batch for OneWeb Generation 1 satellites. The 7th flight of this particular Falcon 9 booster supporting today's mission with tail number 1082. Today's launch is the 98th Falcon 9 launch of 2024 so far and is SpaceX's 103rd overall launch of this year, including the 3 Starship test flights and 2 Falcon Heavy launches. This is SpaceX's 327th Falcon booster reflight to date, meaning the launch of a booster that has flown at least once before. But here is a point to be noted. The number of the Falcon booster reflight in real is 228 if we consider 2 boosters in separate for the Falcon Heavy launch recently for the Europa Clipper. In that case, the Falcon booster reflight for SpaceX will be 228 this time. But as we are considering the overall launch of the Falcon Heavy as one, so we are considering the Falcon booster reflight count for 1 to increase. 94th orbital launch for SpaceX, launching from Space Launch Complex 4 East. And this will be the 161st overall orbital launch from this pad. Now moving on to some reusability statistics. This launch marks 312th Falcon 9 booster reflight to date. This will be the 6th landing on landing zone 4 this year, which marks 21st ground landings made this year, and also the 21st ground landing, overall ground landing on landing zone 4 to date. 7th landing of the first stage booster with tail number 1082. With this mission's first stage landing, which brings the milestones of the 77th overall ground landing made by SpaceX to date, marking the 337th Falcon 9 landing and 356th SpaceX overall landing to date. Speaking of ground landings, let's look into the stats for landings prior to today's mission. Landing zone 1 having 1 unsuccessful landing attempts and 45 successful landings. In comparison, landing zone 2 has encountered all 11 successful landings, while landing zone 4 has experienced 20 successful landings. Please note that these ground landing stats which I mentioned here now are excluding today's mission. These are prior to today's launch. Here are some stats for drone ship landing prior to today's mission. Although today we will be having a landing on the landing zone 4, which is a return to launch site operation. Let's have a look into some key stats for SpaceX launches in this year, including today's OneWeb 20 mission. With today's mission launch, SpaceX will have a total of 103 launches this year, and out of those, 67 are Starlink missions, 33 non-Starlink missions, including one from today for commercial and government organizations, and 3 Starship launches. One of the previous non-Starlink mission, the Europa Clipper mission, was supported by the 11th Falcon Heavy launch to date and the second for this year. SpaceX reused booster for 96 times in these mission launches, including today's mission, showing their commitment to sustainability and reusability. Now, if we look into the geographical distribution, we get they have 66 launches from East Coast in Florida, with 18 from Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, and 48 launches from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. on the west coast, they will have 34 launches, including today's successful launch, all from Space Launch Complex 4 East at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. And there were 3 launches from Gulf Coast at Starbase back in Texas for the Starship 3rd and 4th and 5th integrated flight tests. As for landings, they will be nailing it today 97 times this year. Most of the landings are on drone ships with 76 successful landings, 28 on Of Course I Still Love You, 22 on Just Read the Instructions, and 26 on A Shortfall of Gravitas. For ground landings, they will be pulling off 21 of them today, 13 times on landing zone 1, 2 times on landing zone 2, and 6 times on landing zone 4, including today's landing. Prior to today's launch, the success rate for ground landings is 98.7%. For drone ship landings, it is 96.21%. And the overall landing success rate is 96.73%. The landing success rate for this year got reduced from 100% to 98.96% due to the failure of the booster with tail number 1062 to land on a shortfall of Gravitas drone ship during the Starlink 8-6 mission. And with that, a shortfall of Gravitas witnessed its first unsuccessful landings. Today's mission is the 30th launch since last mission failure, that is the Starlink 9-3 mission. If you are feeling we are adding value to your viewing experience, consider giving this video a like, which really helps YouTube's algorithm to bring in more space fans like you and people to find out this stream. Also consider subscribing to us as we strive hard to bring streams filled with stats and details, and we would be super grateful for your support. As we are nearing for the webcast to begin with just 2 minutes away, just like we are also having only 2 stats to discuss. So let's just take a quick look to these pie charts here. The United States is dominating with 117 orbital launches, including today's mission, comprising a substantial 61.6% of the global total. Rocket Lab launches are also included for the US orbital launches. China follows closely behind, accounting for 25.8% with 49 launches. Russia maintaining a steady pace with 11 launches, marking 5.8% of the pie. Japan having 5 launches so far, making 2.6%. Meanwhile, India and Iran entered the fray with 3 launches each. Both have 1.6% of the pie. Europe also have their share of the pie, having 1.1% with 2 launches so far. And this pie chart denotes the orbital launches by rocket variations. I guess SpaceX adjusted their lift of time, either their lift of time or their webcast time now is just 2 minutes delayed. So no worries, I guess it's still on time. Falcon 9 is having 98 launches, including today's mission, holding the largest share at 51% and leading, which accounts for over half of the total. Rocket Lab's Electron having 11 launches, representing 5.7% of the pie. Roscosmos Soyuz 2 rockets with 9 launches so far this year, which is 4.7% of the global total. China's Long March 2C and Long March 2D having 4 and 7 launches respectively, making 2.1% and 3.6% of the pie. Lastly, this another bigger slice of the pie, this pink slice, which is labeled others, is a mix of different rockets, including Ariane 6 classic version of Vega on its final flight, 2 Falcon Heavy launches, Atlas 5 Delta IV Heavy's final flight, 2 Vulcan Centaur's launch, ISRO's GSLV Mark II and PSLV DL, and others. The names are not exhaustive, but they got 63 launches in total, which is 32.8% of the pie. Today's launch marks the 190th orbital launch globally. Now let's move ahead as it's time for the webcast to begin. Adding value to your viewing experience is AstroYonder's top priority. If you feel we achieved that, please consider liking this video, which helps YouTube's algorithm to have more reach and helps others to find out this stream. Also consider subscribing to our channel as we work hard to bring you streams packed with stats, details, and insights. We would be incredibly grateful for your support, and once again, we thank all of you who are watching us live for being here with us. Right now, we are waiting for the webcast to begin. The webcast has gone live, guys. So enjoy the stream. And Pyramid, I guess it's a best launch for you as you like to see the payload separation. So we will be having a good views today for all the 20 payloads of OneWeb satellites. Hope you will be enjoying.
On your screen is a live view of Falcon 9 awaiting its 10:13 p.m. Pacific Time launch from Slick 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Hey everyone, my name is Soumya Srivastava and I'm a structures engineer here at SpaceX in Hawthorne, California. Thanks for joining us tonight for the Eutelsat OneWeb 20 mission. At T-minus 10 minutes and 15 seconds, our team at Vandenberg has completed checkouts on the vehicle, and the weather, range, and vehicle are all go for launch. And if for any reason we aren't able to launch tonight, a backup opportunity is available tomorrow, October 20th, with the launch window opening at 10:08 p.m. Pacific Time. Our customer today is Eutelsat Group, a GEO-LEO operator with a fleet of 36 geostationary satellites and the OneWeb constellation of more than 600 satellites in low Earth orbit, also known as LEO, that deliver broadcast and connectivity services worldwide. Today's launch will send 20 OneWeb satellites into low Earth orbit, where they will raise over the coming months to integrate into the OneWeb constellation, which orbits at its own unique LEO altitude of 1,200 kilometers above Earth and in staggered height formation to minimize any risk of collision. Today's satellites were built by Airbus, U.S. Space and Defense in Merritt Island, Florida. Let's check out this short video from Eutelsat to learn a bit more about today's mission. solutions, Eutelsat delivers high-end throughput, low-latency connectivity connectivity solutions to connect businesses, communities, governments, maritime customers, aviation sectors, and more, all to meet a wide spectrum of connectivity needs. At T-minus 7 minutes and 16 seconds, let's take a moment to meet the vehicle that's taking the OneWeb satellites to orbit today. Falcon 9 is a two-stage rocket that's developed and manufactured by SpaceX, known for its safe, reliable, and cost-effective access to space. It's also the first and currently the only orbital-class rocket capable of reflight. Starting at the top of the vehicle is the payload fairing, which is a protective shell that encases the payload being sent to space. The fairing will separate and jettison away from the vehicle, exposing the payload once Falcon 9 reaches space. Continuing down the vehicle, we have the second stage. The second stage is powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC, which is optimized to perform in the vacuum of space. We're flying our shortened MVAC nozzle extension today, which you'll get a better view of later in today's webcast. Below that is the first stage, which contains 9 engines, 8 arranged around the outside and 1 center engine, all of which is held in place by a structure called the OctaWeb. Each of these Merlin 1D engines delivers about 190,000 pounds of thrust at sea level, which gives Falcon 9 a combined 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. The Falcon 9 first stage is also equipped with 4 landing legs that deploy just before landing to allow for vertical touchdown on a drone ship or a landing pad. And today's booster will be returning to landing zone 4 at Vandenberg, and this will be its 7th landing. Coming up shortly, the transporter erector, which is also known as the strongback or TE, will retract away from Falcon. The TE is the large truss structure that you see there that's right next to the rocket. And we'll first see the clamps open up around the second stage, and then the TE will pull away from the rocket. And that should be coming up in around a minute from now. The TE is designed to transport, raise, and support Falcon 9 at the launch pad.
Falcon 9, thanks. Are pressurizing for strongback retract.
And we just heard that Falcon 9 is starting to pressurize
are on internal power.
Strongback retract. All great callouts there. So yes, the TE is designed to transport, raise, and support Falcon 9 at the launch pad using umbilicals or flexible lines to route the vehicle's fluids, power, and telemetry from the ground systems to the rocket and payload until Falcon 9 switches to internal power and clears the pad.
Strongback lower has started.
Good callouts there. And there we see those clamp arms opening up and pulling away from stage 2. Now the clamps are fully open and the strongback is beginning to pull away from Falcon 9. So as the strongback continues to recline away from Falcon 9, at this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of rocket-grade kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. Both the first stage and second stage should finish propellant loading about a minute apart from each other, with the first stage finishing up at around the T-minus 3 minute mark and the second stage finishing up around the T-minus 2 minute mark. So we should be coming up on LOX load completion shortly.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Right on time. So in around 30 seconds, the second stage should finish up with propellant loading. And then at around T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will be in startup. And that is when the rocket's autonomous internal flight computers will have taken over the launch countdown. And then just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, we will light the M1D engines for liftoff.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And there we just heard that the second stage is now fully loaded with LOX, and now Falcon 9 is fully loaded with propellant.
Ground gas closure.
So weather is still looking green, and the range is ready to support our T0 of 10:13 p.m. Pacific time. And with that, we are proceeding into the last few minutes of terminal count.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And there you just heard that call out for Falcon 9 in startup, which means that the internal flight computers have taken over the launch countdown. The launch director will be giving...
LD is go for launch.
The launch director has given the final go for launch. So at T-minus 37 seconds, all systems are go for the launch of Falcon 9.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And lift off the Falcon 9, go OneWeb 4. Vehicle is pitching downrange.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
So at T-plus 33 seconds, Falcon 9 has successfully lifted off from Slick 4E at Vandenberg, carrying the 20 Eutelsat OneWeb satellites. During ascent, we tilt or gimbal the engines to turn the rocket horizontally into what we call a gravity turn, to put the rocket on its path to orbit. And moments ago, we throttled the engines down in preparation for max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure,
Vehicle is supersonic.
which is coming up in a few seconds.
Max Q.
So we just had max Q, and the rocket typically needs to go 28,000 kilometers per hour, or about 17,500 miles per hour, horizontally in order to avoid being pulled back down to Earth by gravity and get into orbit. Now we have
And
five
back
events.
chill.
Now we have 5 events coming up in quick succession: MECO, stage set, SES-1, and boost back burn, which starts bringing the first stage back to the launch site, and then fairing deployment, when the fairing halves will separate from the second stage. So we have MECO in about 30 seconds from now.
Main engine cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC ignition.
Stage 1 boost back startup.
And there you heard and maybe even saw MECO, stage SEP, SES-1, and the start of boost back burn, which will last for just under 1 minute. We have some really awesome views on screen right now. And coming up next, we have fairing separation, which is in a few seconds.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And as you just heard and can see right there, we had confirmation of successful separation of both fairing halves from the second stage. Both of the fairing halves on today's mission are flight proven, with one half flying for its 11th time and the other for its 13th. We will be attempting to retrieve these fairing halves again today once they fall back to Earth using our recovery vessel Go Beyond.
Stage 1 boost back shutdown.
And so we just heard the call out for a successful end of the boost back burn. And the first stage booster is now flying back to Vandenberg Space Force Base for a landing on landing zone 4, which is just 1,400 feet away from the launch pad where it took off. It's now T plus 4 minutes and 17 seconds into today's mission, and we're currently in the first of 2 planned MVAC burns before satellite deployment. Just over 6 minutes into flight, you should see the start of our first stage's entry burn, and for the entry burn, we relight 3 M1D engines 1, 5, and 9, which slow down the vehicle as it passes back into the Earth's atmosphere. And we slow down to reduce re-entry forces, which helps us recover and reuse the first stage. During the entry burn, Falcon 9 is decelerating by firing its Merlin engines, but we're still moving really fast. And this causes the vehicle to fly through Merlin's exhaust gases, also known as the rocket's plume, and that deposits a layer of soot on the vehicle surface. And that soot comes from the carbon-based fuel that Falcon 9 burns. The Merlins on the first stage are optimized for sea level, and these achieve 190,000 pounds of thrust during ascent and re-entry. The MVAC engine is optimized for 220,500 pounds of thrust in vacuum, and on your screen you'll notice a shorter nozzle that's attached to the Merlin vacuum engine. And our teams use a shorter nozzle when we don't need as much performance to get the payload to its final destination, but we still fly full-size MVAC nozzles on missions that require a more significant amount of thrust from stage 2 or ones that contain a heavier payload. Entry burn is going to come up shortly, and so we should be able to see that on stage 1 when the engines relight.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
So entry burn has just begun.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And we just had a good call out for entry burn shutdown. Reusability is key to lowering the cost of spaceflight, which enables more investment in critical scientific research. And the Falcon 9 first stage that is supporting today's mission just performed that entry burn for its 7th time. And this booster has previously supported the USSF-62 mission as well as 5 Starlink missions. We're now waiting for the first stage to land at landing zone 4.
Stage 1 FTS has saved. Stage 1 transonic.
Good call outs there, where Falcon 9 is slowing, the stage 1 is slowing down. Landing burn should be coming up shortly.
Stage 1 landing burn.
And there we have the
Stage 2 is
landing
terminal
burn,
guidance.
where engine 9 has relit right before touching down on the landings at landing zone 4.
Stage 1 landing leg deployed. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And there you have it. That landing
Stage
marks
2 uptake
SpaceX's
complete.
357th recovery of an orbital class rocket, including first stage landings for Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy. And we are now waiting for second engine cutoff, which is coming up next.
Nominal orbital insertion.
And we just had SECO 1 and good confirmation of nominal orbital insertion. So the second stage is now embarking on its coast phase, which we're going to take a short break for. And after the coast phase, we will relight that MVEC engine for a second time around the T plus 55-minute mark, and that will be followed by payload deploy. So we'll see you back here in about 45 minutes.
Hello guys, it's me Dipto again here for discussing the deployment sequence. We did had a swift liftoff for the OneWeb 20 mission, and recently we did got the callouts for the stage 1 successful landing. With that we made 337th successful landing of an orbital class Falcon 9 rocket. Followed by that, we had MVAC shut down for the first time in today's flight, that is SECO 1, and the second stage entered a nominal orbit. Now we are awaiting for the second stage engine ignition, that is SES 2 at T plus 55 minutes and 3 seconds. Following that, we will have the second stage engine cutoff, SECO 2 at T plus 55 minutes and 6 seconds. Following that, we will have the payload deployment sequence to begin at T plus 59 minutes and 3 seconds. And the payload deployment will wrap up at T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 53 seconds with the deployment of the 90th and 20th OneWeb satellite. Now on the left corner of your screen, I have placed the payload deployment sequence details. The sequence begins with the deployment of the first and second OneWeb satellites, marking the start of a critical payload separation at T plus 59 minutes and 3 seconds. Today, all of the 20 OneWeb satellites will be deployed in a pair. Following the first deployment of the first and second OneWeb satellites, we'll have a 32 seconds of wait from the previous deployment, and we will then have the third and fourth OneWeb satellites to be deployed into orbit at T plus 59 minutes and 35 seconds. Next, after a brief pause of 56 seconds, at the fifth and sixth OneWeb satellites will be released at T plus 1 hour and 31 seconds. Following that, in a swift 2 seconds window, the 7th and 8th OneWeb satellites will be joining their counterparts in space at T plus 1 hour and 33 seconds. The brief gap between deployments emphasizes the rhythm that this mission is following, where every second counts. A longer break after that, with 1 minute and 40 seconds elapsing before the next pair continues to deploy, building the constellation. At T plus 1 hour, 2 minutes and 13 seconds, at this point, the 9th and 10th OneWeb satellites will be released. The mission continues as the 11th and the 12th OneWeb satellites are deployed after a significant 10 minutes and 30 seconds of careful monitoring and system checks at T plus 1 hour, 12 seconds and 43 seconds. These lengthy intervals ensures that every phase of the deployment goes smoothly without any glitch. Then, following a pause of 3 minutes and 32 seconds, the 13th and the 14th OneWeb satellites make their way into orbit. The mission team continues to deliver on time, showcasing the power of the automation in space technology. The 13th and the 14th OneWeb satellite will be deployed at 1 hour, 16 minutes and 15 seconds. After another brief but crucial break of 56 seconds of precise timing, the 15th and the 16th OneWeb satellites will be deployed into space at T plus 1 hour, 17 minutes and 11 seconds. Nearing the end of the deployment sequence, the 17th and the 18th OneWeb satellites take their place among the stars. After 1 minute and 16 seconds since the last deployment at T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 27 seconds. The steady flow of the satellites builds anticipation as the sequence heads towards its conclusion. Finally, after 26 seconds, the deployment sequence wrap up with the release of the 19th and the 20th OneWeb satellites at T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 53 seconds. With this last action, the spacecraft continues on its mission, leaving behind a perfectly executed satellite deployment. This entire payload deployment sequence is a great example of the efficiency and the precision involved in modern space missions, with every moment meticulously planned to ensure the success of OneWeb satellite network expansion. Would like to welcome Asit Chakraborty for joining us. Well, to summarize the event, I guess you mean that what happened from the start. So we did had a liftoff of the Falcon 9 from Vandenberg Space Force Base from Space Launch Complex 4 East, heading towards a southwest trajectory to the low Earth orbit. Following that, we had the max Q, then we had some different events in rapid succession. First, we had the MECO, main engine cutoff. Then at T plus 2 minutes and 19 seconds, we had the stage separation. First and second stage getting separated from each other. After 8 seconds later, the second stage MVAC engine reignited for the first time during today's flight. That is SES-1 at T plus 2 minutes and 27 seconds. T plus 2 minutes and 32 seconds, the first stage boost back burn commenced just after having a flip maneuver with the help of nitrogen coal gas thrusters. Next, we had the payload deployment at T plus 3 minutes and 2 seconds mark. 3 minutes and 28 seconds, the first stage boost back burn ends, followed by grid fin deployment on the first stage. After 2 minutes and 50 seconds at T plus 6 minutes and 18 seconds, the first stage entry burn began lasting for 15 seconds up to 6 minutes and 33 seconds mark, ending the entry burn for the Falcon 9's first stage. We did heard some callouts there. Stage 1 FTS being saved. A quick fun fact that the stage 1 FTS is saved, or one can say flight termination systems are turned off or disabled after the re-entry burn, whereas the stage 2 FTS is saved after the orbital insertion burn. We also got the call out for stage 2 FTS being saved. Additionally, we did got the call out for stage 1 being transonic. Next milestones we achieved at T plus 7 minutes and 18 seconds, where the stage 1 landing burn began. At T plus 7 minutes and 56 seconds, the first stage landed successfully on the landing zone 4. It was the 21st time for the particular landing zone to have a landing, marking SpaceX's 356th overall booster landing to date. The second stage MVAC engine, that is SECO 1, happened for the first time in today's flight, and following that we entered into a parking orbit at T plus 8 minutes and 29 seconds. Right now we are in this coast phase. We are awaiting next milestone to happen at T plus 55 minutes and 3 seconds, where the second stage MVAC engine will reignite for a quick 3 seconds of burn, that is SES2, and turning it off at T plus 55 minutes and 6 seconds, that is SECO 2, which will set up the batch of 20 OneWeb satellites for its deployment sequence, beginning at T plus 59 minutes and 3 seconds, with the first pair of satellites, and the deployment sequence concludes with the 10th pair of satellites at approximately T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 53 seconds. So that's a summary of the whole mission for today. I hope it helps you somehow, Asit Chakraborty. And once again, thanks for joining us. Meanwhile, let's talk something different from this mission, as we have some time from the next milestones to get achieved. As we all know, China has released the first the spacesuit for their first lunar landing. Recently, the fashion brand Prada and Axiom Space, they have also released their first look of the lunar landing space suits. Hope you guys have checked it out. Let me see if I have any clips of that, so that you can have a glimpse of that. Well, you can see guys on the left down corner of your screen, the recently released spacesuits by the fashion brand Prada with Axiom Space for their first lunar landing spacesuit. Well, there was an infographic. Yes, we found it. I'm stretching it right now just for a while so that you can read it well. The most interestingly, this Axiom Space recently released this spacesuit, and they are claiming it will have the 4G LTE communication. This is the front look of the recently released Axiom Space lunar spacesuit. It indeed looks very attractive, and you can see the visors. They are somewhat resembling the SpaceX EVA suits, but they are technically different, and they look a little more attractive, I guess, to me at least. This is a side view of the spacesuit. And you can see that cool design on the shoes of the spacesuit. So we are having some competitions right now on this spacesuit industry. China, SpaceX, and now the Axiom Space. Now we are nearing for the next event to happen. That is for the MBAC engine reignition for a quick 3 seconds of burn. S2 at T plus 55 minutes and 3 seconds. And then followed by SECO2 at T plus 55 minutes and 6 seconds at T plus 55 minutes and 6 seconds. That will set up the batch of 20 OneWeb satellites for its deployment sequence, beginning at T plus 59 minutes and 3 seconds, with the first pair of satellites, and the deployment sequence will conclude with the 10th pair, marking the deployment of all 20 OneWeb satellites at approximately T plus 1 hour, 18 minutes and 53 seconds.
20 mission. We've had a great mission so far. Falcon 9 launched on time at 10:13 p.m. Pacific time from Slick 4 East in Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. We had a successful ascent, fairing separation, and second stage orbital insertion. We also recovered the first stage at landing zone 4, which marked its 7th landing. So we're now seconds away from a second ignition of the MVAC, which will carry the second stage and the OneWeb payload into the orbit necessary to deploy the satellites. This burn will be quick, and it's only going to last a couple of seconds. And it's coming up in about 15 seconds from now.
Good orbit insertion.
And there was a good call out there for good orbit. And as a reminder, the 20 OneWeb satellites are still attached to Falcon 9's second stage. Coming up at about T plus 59 minutes is the start of the payload deploy sequence, which should take a little less than 20 minutes to complete. So we'll be listening for the start of those callouts in a few minutes. So now we're just a couple of minutes away from payload deploy, and our initial burn and orbit insertion put us into an elliptical orbit, which is one where the highest point, the apogee, and the lowest point, the perigee of the orbit, are different. And so it put us into a 175 kilometer by 600 kilometer orbit. And that last short burn that we just saw put us into a circular orbit for payload deployment into a 600 kilometer by 600 kilometer orbit. So it turns out from orbital mechanics that a burn along the direction of travel raises the opposite side of the ellipse, which is why we took that burn at apogee to raise the perigee. So now that we've completed both of those burns today, we are now just a few minutes away from the first payload deploy, where we will be deploying 10 of the satellites, and then we'll be taking a short break and come back for the final 10 satellites on this payload. As a reminder, our customer today is Eutelsat Group, which operates a fleet of 35 geostationary satellites and a constellation of more than 600 satellites in low Earth orbit to deliver broadcast and connectivity services worldwide. The 20 OneWeb LEO satellites launching today were built by Airbus U.S. Space and Defense in Merritt Island, Florida. And once deployed, they will continue to raise their orbit over the coming months and will be integrated into the OneWeb LEO constellation. So we should start seeing deployment of the first 20 Eutelsat of the first 10 of the 20 Eutelsat OneWeb satellites in the next few seconds here.
A4 and A8 have been deployed.
So we just had deployment of the first 2 satellites of this batch of 10, and the next 2 will be deployed in about 30 seconds from now.
Sat A3 and A7 have been deployed.
Good call out there for the next pair that have just deployed. So far we have deployed 4 out of the 10 satellites in this first payload deployment, and we're waiting
Sat
for...
A2 and A6 have been deployed.
And there we just heard the next pair have been deployed, so there's 4 more remaining.
Sat A1 and Sat A5 have been deployed.
Another good call out there. So there are 2 more satellites that remain to be deployed in this initial set of 10. They should be deploying in about a minute.
Sat B4 and B8 have been deployed.
And great call outs there. So we've now deployed 10 out of the 20 satellites, and we now have a second roughly 10-minute coast phase, which we're going to take another short break for. And after the coast phase, we'll be back to deploy the remaining 10 satellites just after the T+1 hour and 12-minute mark. So we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. So even though we don't have views of satellite deployment yet, we will still get confirmation over the nets until we regain camera views. So we are currently standing by for those callouts, and we will share them as soon as we hear them. We should be coming up on signal acquisition shortly.
Sat B1 and B5 separation confirmed.
Good callouts there for the first two of this batch of 10.
Sat B2 and B6 separation confirmed.
And a great view of that pair deploying. So far we've now deployed a total of 14 of the 20 satellites aboard today's mission. We have an awesome view on our screen right now, but even if we lose views of satellite deployment, we will still continue to get confirmation.
Sat C1 and C5 separation confirmed.
And another 2 have deployed, and we got an awesome view of that deployment as well. So now there are 4 more satellites that remain to be deployed, and we have successfully deployed 16 out of the 20 so far. The satellites that you see on your screen right now were built by
Sat B3 and B7 separation confirmed.
another successful deployment of 2 more satellites. These satellites were built by Airbus US Space and Defense in Merritt Island, Florida. And so now there are the final 2 satellites that remain to be deployed from the set of 20.
Sat C3 and C7 separation confirmed.
So with the final 2 on their way, we can confirm successful deployment.
Deployed.
We can now confirm successful deployment of all 20 spacecraft on today's mission. And that wraps up our coverage for today. Today's launch concludes our 99th successful launch this year and our 394th overall. All of us here at SpaceX want to give a huge thanks to our customer Eutelsat Group for entrusting us with today's mission. We also want to thank the Range and the Federal Aviation Administration for their support. Be sure to follow us at SpaceX on X for upcoming launch updates. And to all of our viewers, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you again soon.
So that's the concluding call out we were waiting for. Confirmation of all OneWeb satellites deployment. Today's launch marked SpaceX's 394th successful mission, with the landing marking their 356th success. So that's a wrap for now. Don't forget to follow AstroYonder on X for all the latest space news and updates on upcoming launches. Hope you had a blast watching with us. Big thanks to everyone who tuned in today, and we wish you all to have an awesome weekend. Thanks Fairmade for being there and watching the stream for a 1 hour above stream and staying till the end. Hopefully you enjoyed the payload deployment, although it is evident with your iconic EA. So thanks once again. And thanks for watching. This is AstroYonder Live, and I'm Dipto signing off for now, and we will see you next time.